Hello, lovely students. It is Tuesday, ready to roll. I'm going to share a couple things on worldview thesis statements, going to give you a few examples of those. I'm also today posting the Old Man in the Sea. Actually, I posted yesterday the Old Man in the Sea discussion post for you all this week, so you'll want to look at that. And then I'm also putting up the two Great Gatsby reading schedules today, so you can pick from those and go ahead and get started reading. All right, so that's going to be your first thing, is to look at the reading schedules and decide which option you would like to complete. And just let me know on that page which one you're planning on doing. There's some flexibility with that, so if you get into it and you're like, oh, shoot, I bit off more than I could chew. I'm going to let you be flexible with that, just as long as you finish one or a combination of the options by the time you're finished. Or if you start reading it and you're originally going with the abridged schedule and then you're like, hey, I actually like this and have time to read, you can end up reading the whole thing. That's fine. I'm just providing, you can't just read nothing. But yeah, so do one of those. Discussion post, whole, broken, bent. So your answer is due tomorrow. I want to see you wrestling with this and I'll respond. Okay, so don't feel like you have to have a polished, perfect response with a nice, neat pigeonholing of what your book is. Okay, so we're talking through it. I know that the fact that we're not having a face-to-face dialogue may make that feel a little more awkward because the back and forth isn't as in the moment, but that's okay. Just still put down what you think and why. Then again, discussion post for Old Man in the Sea. This one you're going to do your answer and two responses, and that's due Thursday. So you get to interact with each other on that one. You can with the whole broken bit one, but you don't have to. So I'm only requiring just your initial response on the whole broken and bent one. And then thesis statement with supports is going to be due again on Monday so that we can write our paper, and that'll be due on May 6th. And again, vocabulary quiz Monday because we are giving you guys a cushion on Fridays. All right, worldview sample thesis statement. So I really just came up with these today as just some examples of some guiding thesis statements. You may come up with one similar or better. So these are just some options of ways that this might look. So say I was going to write a worldview paper on Paradise Lost. I could say something like, although Satan makes a grand appearance as he rallies the forces of evil, John Milton's Christian view of God's providence and man's sinful nature permeates his epic poem, Paradise Lost. So what I would be proving and showing is that Christian view of God's providence and man's sinful nature in the Paradise Lost, all of that. So that's what I would be tracing throughout. Of course, I would acknowledge, Satan's grand appearance and his rhetoric and how that makes the reader feel. I would address that, but I have to look at the work as a whole. So some people I would want to address my opposition would argue that Satan is the hero of the book. But if you look at the whole book and what John Milton says at the beginning about his purpose and his intent in the story, his purpose is that God is still the good guy, Satan's still the bad guy, and he's focusing on God's providence, really despite man's sinful nature. So I could, this would be a thesis statement to set me up for arguing that. Then I tried to pick a combination of things. So with a catchy soundtrack and lovable characters, you could tweak that if you wanted to. Frozen perpetuates the humanistic idea that individuals must throw off the chains of society and authority and assert their own independence to find true identity and success. Now, if I wanted to be nitpicky, I would use more academic language than throw off the chains of society. But right here, we're just getting the point of there's a humanistic worldview that actually comes out through Frozen. It's the you make yourself who you are, and that, society and authority, those are the bad guys. And in order to be independent, you've got to make that decision and assert your own self. So that, I could argue that, and I would want to address maybe some opposition if, that was a popular thing that came to focus. All right. Then we have, although controversial in some Christian circles due to the presence of magic and witchcraft, the themes of sin, dying to self, and redemptive sacrificial love echo the gospel and permeate the Harry Potter series. So that's kind of also just through the years has been a popular one to do for worldview. And you've got people who argue on both sides. But the point here is that you have a thesis statement that is addressing some specifics, okay? Well, what does the series seem to say about sin? Dying to self, redemption? Are there echoes of the gospel? So going back to Mr. Bundy's PowerPoint, what echoes of the gospel can we find in our stories? So you can talk about that. So this is a sample thesis statement. It's not the only option for each book that I've presented here, or movie. All right, and then finally, full of imagination and adventure, the beloved and classic Star Wars saga weaves New Age ideology through its emphasis on personal transcendence and the Force. Okay, so you could talk about the New Age ideology in Star Wars. Okay, now I want to provide you, I'm going to slip you guys extra resources that if you're curious and you have time, you can look at, and if not, you do not have to, but I want to provide that for those of you all who want a little bit more with this topic of worldview and stories, okay? And the purpose is not to tell you that you should read Harry Potter and not read Star Wars or watch Star Wars, okay? The purpose of all of this is to get you aware and thinking about, okay, what does Christianity say, and what echoes of different worldviews, Christian or not, are threaded throughout these stories, and some of them may have a mixture. And so it's really important to become discerning and to engage well with the world to be able to discern and identify and know those. So this is really an identification process. All right, so I'm going to throw some resources at you. The one for today is Stage and Story, and there's a webinar on here. It is a little bit longer, um, but it's one that, yeah, if you did this one, and yes, it's Mr. Bundy's, and I'm not just putting it because it's Mr. Bundy's, but because it's actually pretty good. And so I've shared it with some different people. Um, you guys are old enough, I think, to watch this one. He presents several different types of stories, and some of them you and your families may be like, oh yeah, that's awesome, and some of them you may not. And there may be things that you present that he may be like, oh yeah, that's awesome, and other things that he might be like, oh, it's not. So, you know, the point here with this webinar is the process, the questions, the way that he helps to think about. And he's got some additional movies that he provides as examples. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I'm actually not a cool kid with a great, you know, movie repertoire. So he's watched a whole lot more than I have. And I feel like that would really benefit some of you guys who are way more into the movie culture. And he will look at various aspects. He doesn't just talk about, you know, a list of, you know, how many bad words they say and things like that. That's not really the approach. It's an approach of what is the overall perspective of the book or movie, and gives you some great things to think about. There's also things on the site you can explore. There's podcasts where they look at certain books and movies. There's a blog. So for example, this I know would appeal to some of you all. But so I mean, you know, all kinds of different things, and there's different people who write on here. But the Why I Saw the Joker movie, he went to see it and he did a review of it, and I think it's only 4 minutes. Might be something that you're interested in reading, because I know several of you all saw that and you're interested in it. So just wanted to provide that with you. It is, of course, is not a requirement. It does take up some time. If you were like, hey, Miss Carrier, I want to do this for a little bit of extra credit, you can. I don't really think you guys are going to need extra credit, but yeah, just take and enjoy if you so desire. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I am praying for you guys, and I will have more specifics for helping you with your paper in the future. All right, have a wonderful day.